missing someone. Love with all your heart. Missing someone. Love with heart.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. So this week I'm going to show you a highlighting technique. So this is a client, this is like her first time coming in to me, and we're going to be doing a corrective highlight. She has a lot of different bandings in her hair because she's gone through multiple different hairdressers that just did different highlighting patterns, and when that happens you get different bands of dark, and sometimes the highlights don't get light enough, and it makes it very difficult for a client to get super light when they go to different hairdressers and try different people and they all do different things on their hair. So whenever a client comes in with this type of canvas where it's very uneven and we kind of have to even it out, I definitely let them know that it's going to take multiple sessions to get them pretty solid and even. But majority of it, we're going to try and get through it today. So I'm going to show you what I normally would do on a client who has a lot of dark and a lot of banding, or just pieces that are uneven, to get it eventually more solid and more even, because her goal eventually is to be like platinum or just something really light. But it's really hard for her to get there because since she's gone through different people to highlight her hair, some of the pieces are really light, and then some pieces in her hair are not lifted all the way, so we're gonna have to try and correct those. But I have to be super careful because those pieces that are pretty much a level 10 are so close to pieces that are like not a level 10. Some of them are level 7, some of them are level 6, and some of them are level 8. So you gotta be really careful with overlapping so that you don't damage her hair. But it's not going to be 100% perfect. It'll get there eventually, but you want to explain to your client that it's not going to be there 100% after the first few sessions. So I'm starting off with just like highlighting her hairline. So I'm doing pretty much like a medium-sized weave to baby light just to kind of break it up around her hairline. I don't like to do anything super solid there because I don't want any like lines or harsh lines. I want it to be nice and blended with the rest of her hair. So that's why I like to do a weave, and I'm trying to pick up as much of the dark as possible. As I go through the back section here, I do realize that some of the previous sessions that she's gone highlighted, they didn't really touch a lot of it, so a lot of the back part you'll see too is pretty dark, and eventually we want her to be as solid as possible. So as we go through her sessions, she's going to try and come back every, I would say, 10 to 12 weeks. In each session, I usually will try to pick out all of the dark that I left at the previous, and eventually the hair does get solid over time. So for my products that I'm using the Blonde Me Schwarzkopf Lightener, and my first bowl that I've made up is a bowl of equal parts of 6 and 20 volume, and I like to mix that with the powder. I'll do 1 part powder to 2 parts developer, just so it's nice and creamy and doesn't like give any slippage or anything. It's a nice thick consistency. So now I'm going in, and you can see that a lot of the dark here right below where the nape is, it's pretty dark. Like the root here goes pretty far down. So I'm just going to slice because slicing is going to give you the most amount of lightness. And I am trying to pick out any of her previous highlights just to be super careful. So in this session, what we're focusing on is just lightening the darkest portions of her hair. So wherever her virgin is, everything else that is previously highlighted that is not a level 10, we're going to worry about lightening that later. But in this session, I want to achieve and get the darkest parts of her hair as light as possible first, and we'll try and get those parts as solid as possible before lightening the mids and ends. And also by doing that, you kind of give those mids and ends that are previously highlighted a little bit of a break from any type of lightening service, because you don't want to over process them too soon. So I'm going to continue doing slices up the back of the head, and I'm just doing a center parting. Since I've already lined her hairline, I usually will do the hairline detailing all the way up to the tops of the ear, and I'll show you guys later how I reach the, like, connect the front and the back that way. But since we've already lined the hairline, I just need to really focus on the back area here. So I'm just doing like a center section all the way up the whole mohawk of her head, and sometimes the mohawk positioning will differ if they part on the side or in the middle. So just depending on where your client parts their hair is where you'll kind of slowly move the mohawk towards there. But I'm just doing a center section because I find that it's faster than splitting up the back into two sections. So since the back here has a lot of dark, my spacing between the highlights are pretty close together. I would say that they're probably like a 1/4 inch apart from each other, and I'm trying to take very thin slices, thin enough to where you can see them, especially on a client who has like dark, medium to coarse hair. You don't want to take a section that's too thick because it won't lighten evenly, and that's where she'll get those uneven spots where some pieces are a level 10 and some pieces are a level like 8. So I don't know if you guys can see that some of her previous highlights, some of them are chunky, some of them are medium. It's very inconsistent, and I feel like doing slices in the back here, it makes it very easy for me to see them next time I do her hair, because I can just slice through her head, do the same exact placement, and see exactly where the dark that I left out this appointment is. And for my foils, when doing this type of correction, I do like to use the long foils. I don't like to pile on foils because that just takes up more time, and doing the long foils, I'm able to lay the foil flat onto the hair. I find that doing it like this and locking in the foil from the sides and the bottom, if you don't fold where the lightener is, it lifts a lot more even than if you were to fold the foil. So by now I've probably already mixed up the Blonde Me lightener to 20 volume, and for the rest of the head and the rest of the application, I'm just going to be using 20 volume for the whole thing. So since I'm on the top part of her head, this is where I start to kind of tilt the mohawk section towards wherever she parts her hair. So she parts to the side, so I did move it slightly towards closer to where her side part is. And here I am still taking very thin sections and keeping my foils very close together. So the type of look that she was going for was something that was super solid. She didn't like seeing her roots to be super dark. And for a client who wants to be more solid but still do highlights, they have to come in within the 10 to 12 week mark. If they don't, then they start to get too much dimension and it's just not the look that they want. So it's good to explain to your client, depending on what kind of root they're looking for and what their look is, how far apart their appointment should be. And on the top here, I'm still slicing the head, but you can see that she has pretty much like a baby light on the top. This was super tedious to pick out because I literally had to pick out her previous highlights, which were baby lighted, and just be super careful here. So you can see I'm like really just taking my time and just picking out the previous highlights. And this is the clips sped up, and it still is. You can see I'm taking a pretty long time going through and picking up those highlights. And this part probably took the longest because the whole top part of her head was baby lighted, and sometimes it's just like you can't get all of those highlights, and it's something that you do have to explain to your clients too, because they don't understand that sometimes when they come in from another hairdresser's work and they are previously baby lighted like that, it's really hard to pick out those baby lights because it's literally so fine and so close together from their previous highlights. So for something like this, if it's like a correction and you see that you need to pick out these baby fine highlights, I usually will let the client know in the consultation prior to even coloring their hair to kind of even show them what you're working with. Like I'll literally take a slice and show their highlight and show them the little bands and little pieces that you'll have to pick out, so that they understand that this is going to take a while and this might cost a little bit extra just because you are going to be using extra product and extra time to make it so detailed and get them as even as possible. So now that I'm moving on to her money piece, just right at the hairline, I'm going to do a very small little baby light, and then everything past that I'm pretty much just going to slice it because I want her to feel pretty solid. So I'm just doing slices all the way back to connect that money piece to the rest of the back mohawk section, and then I'll move over to the sides after. So for the sides, I've already done the side money piece, and I did about like 2 baby lights back to back, and then I did a baby light to connect the front and the back right above the ear, and then everything beyond that you can see right here. I'm kind of doing like a chunky weave and just picking out any of her previous highlights and being super careful. There are some that it's just impossible for me to get, but over time as I keep highlighting her, I'll be able to get them eventually. It's just a matter of maintaining the integrity of your hair and making sure that you don't overlap. And then for the side sections, my spacing for here would probably be like 1/2 inch against each other. And then whenever I'm doing the sides too, while I am weaving the hair, what I'm trying to look for is the pieces that have the longest root. I want to tackle those first because the longer you leave them in, obviously the hair grows and it gets a little bit longer. So every time I highlight any of my clients, I always try and look for the longest root. So I let my clients foil probably to a level 9 and 10, and for today's sake, since this is my first time lightening her, I'm not going to be touching her mids and ends. I kind of want to see how her hair reacts to her new hair care routine and how the color is. And once I feel like her hair is super healthy with the products that I recommend, then I can feel confident enough to lighten the mids and ends. So for her toner, I'm using the Pulp Bright Liquid Demis for her root, and I mixed up a 6-1 with clear. I mixed that equal parts to make a 7-1. That's basically a level 7 ash, which is more blue based because we're going to be doing a silver type of color. So I wanted something that wasn't too dark but enough depth to give her a little bit of a root shadow before we apply the silver toner. So now that I've applied the root, I apply the root all throughout the head except the hairline. I usually will section out about 1 inch from the hairline around the front and do that part last. So now I'm going in with my lighter formulation, and I'm using the Pulp Bright Rapid Toners. I did a mixture of silver, violet, and moonstone. And then I like to mix that with 6 volume, and I'll usually mix it 1 to 2 with their 6 volume just to kind of dilute it and make it process a little bit slower. Since this is a rapid toner, this toner does process very quickly, so that's why I dilute it to process a little bit slower. And then I'm also applying it to the mid first because I want the mid to start processing, and then I'll gradually brush it over the ends to kind of give it a really pretty nice gradient. And then for this toner, I don't really have a specific processing time. I usually just watch it, and then once it's ready, I kind of rinse it out. But her hair is a little bit more porous on the end, so that's another reason why I started to apply it on the mid first, because I knew that would take a little bit longer than the end. Typically when the hair is a lot more porous, it does tend to grab the toner a lot quicker. So once I was done applying the toner, everything on the back, I went ahead and did the front hairline, the root, and the mids and ends. Alrighty guys, so here is her finished look. You can see that her hair turned out nice and gray. Everything looks fairly even, and her roots look pretty solid. She was super happy with the end result, and the maintenance on this, she'll have to come in within a range of like 10 to 12 weeks to touch up her roots, and each time she comes in, she will get a little bit lighter. I'll be able to get her lighten the ends a little bit lighter, and she'll get to her goal little by little with keeping her hair super healthy. Alrighty guys, that is it for this week's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in, and as always, I will talk to you guys next week.